Let's start with this from CNN. Jussie Smollett was released from jail Wednesday night after an Illinois appeals court granted an emergency motion by his defense attorney. Smollett's legal team is looking to delay his sentence and grant him bond until their appeal of his conviction is decided on. The former Empire actor was sentenced last week to 30 months of felony probation, including 150 days in jail, including some restitution as well. Quote, "There's no room for politics in our court system," defense attorney Nenya Uche said in a news conference shortly after the actor's release. "Regardless of what you think about this case, the real question is, should black men be walked into jail for a Class 4 felony? That's a disgrace," the attorney added. Then you get to the reason for this release. There wasn't much reason given by the court for why they're releasing Jussie Smollett from prison. We know the real reason, which we'll get to in a second. As far as any reason, what they basically say is that, the appeal's going to take a long time, and it's only 150 days in jail, so he's appealing the sentence, and by the time the appeal's decided, the sentence will be over anyway, so we're just going to let him out of jail. By that logic, well, I guess we're never going to send anybody to jail again for 6-month sentences, I guess, are out the window now, because that's always going to be the case, that if you appeal it, the appeal will take longer than the sentence. So is that what that means? We can't send anybody to jail for that amount of time? This only further affirms what I said immediately after the sentence was passed down. And there were people talking about, even people who were happy that he was going to jail were saying, "Oh, that's a pretty harsh sentence." No, it should have been much more than that. He should have been looking at 5, 10, 15 years for all the reasons that we've talked about. Given that he's unrepentant, given the just sociopathic nature of everything that went into the premeditation, as I pointed out many times, the fact that he was willing to let innocent people take the fall for him, all of that, perjured himself on the stand, was trying to inflame racial tensions. Would have been fine if there was a riot in Chicago over this. He would not only would have been fine with it, he would have been happy about it. He probably was upset that there was no riot. That's yet another thing that makes him a victim, is that people weren't rioting over it. So you take all that into consideration, you could easily justify the max prison sentence, which would have been, as the sentencing judge admitted, 15 years, and he should have gotten all 15 years. And then at least they can't release him from jail on the excuse that the appeal will take longer than the sentence. But now he's out of jail, and his defense attorney says, "Well, should we be marching? Should we be walking black men into jail for Class 4 felonies?" Let me answer that question for you, if I could. The answer is yes. Why shouldn't we be? Why shouldn't we be walking black men into jail for Class 4 felonies? But the law stipulates that you can go to jail for those kinds of crimes. Now, you notice the only thing that the defense attorney is worried about is black men. So white men, we can march. Oh yeah, well, they can go to jail. But black men? How dare we put black men in jail? He's almost admitting, just by saying that, he's almost admitting what we all know to be true anyway. That despite all the talk about white privilege and everything else, there is privilege in this country. There's no question about it. There are people who are privileged in many different ways. There's the basic kind of privilege that comes with being wealthy and having a lot of money and being famous. Jussie Smollett has all that. There's also the privilege that comes tied to identity. There is racial privilege. There is identity-based privilege. And it's privilege that you experience in the culture, in society, through social advantages, and you also experience it in the courtroom. But we're not giving that privilege out to white people unless they can claim some other privileged identity for them. Now, a white person who says he's gay or trans, sure, he'll get some privilege. But the reality is that Jussie Smollett, as a black, gay, rich, famous person, is almost as privileged as you can possibly get. And that's exactly how he's gotten away with all of this. Got away with doing all of this and getting on the stand and perjuring himself, lying to the court for hours on end, which the sentencing judge mentioned that and pretended to be upset about it. That's almost as privileged as you could possibly get in our society today. The only thing that would make Jussie Smollett more privileged is if he was trans. That's the one thing. That's the one advantage, the one card he hasn't played yet. Yet. I mean, emphasis on yet. And maybe my guess is that now that he's out of jail and all the legal problems are going to be put behind him, you know, the next thing that he's going to want is he's going to want to get back into Hollywood and start starring in films again. And I think I think he'll have no problem doing that. But if he really wants to make sure that Hollywood embraces him and he can get his whole life back and maybe even benefit from this in the end, then just come out as trans. So that's my guess in the next couple of years, Jussie Smollett. Jussie Smollett will become Jessica Smollett in the next couple of years. That is my guess. Maybe Jussie is already a gender-neutral name, so he doesn't even need to change it. It's already all set up for him.